Welcome back to the Big Fish, Little Fish podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Teo. We have a few topics we want to touch on, and maybe some extra amenities we're going to throw
And what
in there.
episode is this, Miguel?
This is episode 20.
Wow.
We've officially made it to, we've done 10 episodes.
Yes. And I think that every time we hit these landmarks, I also think back to our very first ever podcast. And we were on a completely different path, completely different wave, thinking about the world differently, thinking about what we were going to talk about on the podcast differently. But you know the one thing we talked about on episode 1 was metrics around podcasting. And we were talking about how so many podcasts are out there, but how like the percentage gets smaller and smaller when you go to the higher amounts of episodes that podcast produces. And like it was like only a handful make it past episode 2, and then even less make it past episode 5, and less past 10. So I feel like every time we do a podcast, we're sitting down and we're like moving our way up the ladder in terms of the percentage of podcasts that last. And part of this whole thing is like, do you love what you're talking about enough to keep on going? And man, we're at episode 20 and I couldn't be happier. I love this podcast.
I also do enjoy the podcast, although it doesn't pay as much as I want. I'd love to get I'd love to start talking to potential, listen, my contract is almost up and I'm going to have to start getting paid what I'm owed to keep doing this for all of my viewers, And you know what? I'm also open to talking to sponsorships. So if there's anybody who's watching this who's a potential sponsor, reach out. We're open to negotiations.
All right. Throwing out, seeing what the marketplace is offering for the Big Fish, Little Fish podcast.
Yeah.
I think you're going to be surprised.
But we're not willing to compromise content for money. No. We'd rather pay out of pocket to do a podcast than just sign our podcast soul away for money.
I will not be influenced by any sponsor.
Yeah.
A sponsor has to align to the Big Fish, Little Fish values to be on it. It is a privilege to be associated with the Big Fish, Little Fish pod.
Yeah. I mean, you think our viewers would want to know? You think they'd be okay to find out that we are changing the way we talk because of sponsorship money? No, they would not be okay with it.
And I hope at episode 100, we can say the exact same thing. That's my goal, is that no matter where this goes and no matter what the journey takes us on with the podcasting, we don't lose who we are.
Correct.
And what we want to talk about. And speaking of what we want to talk about, what do we want to talk about on episode 20?
Well, one of the things that we're going to talk about that's like relatively trending. People are kind of talking about it. It's on the horizon. It's something I think that is going to disrupt the market, and that is self-driving cars. Now, right now, Tesla is probably the leading company when it comes to self-driving cars, but they're starting to be robo-taxis. Have you heard of Waymo?
No, honestly.
Or not Waymo, Waymo. So Waymo is this company that only services 4 cities right now. The services are in San Francisco, Phoenix, Los Angeles. And I thought there was a 4th one, but I didn't write it down. Eugene, do me a favor. Look up Waymo and just find out what are the cities that Waymo services. And they're literally robo-taxis. They're basically taxis that you get in the car and there's nobody in it. And it takes you wherever. And it's partnered up with Uber. And these cities right now, I guess, and I don't know how to operate because I've never used it, but I guess you get the app and then you give it the address of where you're trying to go, and then it goes and picks you up and it takes you. And it's a fairly new service, but people are using it. People are enjoying it. And to my understanding, there hasn't been any seriously bad injuries caused by Waymo. And it's like the parent company is Google.
I did not know any of this.
And the type of car they're using is the electric Jaguar 1 Pace. So they're only using that type of car. And yeah, I mean, right now it's out there. People are using it.
Would you take it?
Right now?
Yeah. It's in your city. You need to go to a conference.
I'd try it. Yeah, I'd try it. I don't know if it's good for the economy. I don't know long term if it's good. I don't know if I trust it long term.
What does that mean?
Like, I don't know if it becomes a more rampant thing. I don't know if I'll be using it on a consistent basis.
But you'd use it now?
Just to try it out, you know? Just like any new technology, like there's the, what's it called? The virtual reality goggles. I tried out, but I'm not like out here going to actively be on virtual reality goggles. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not super interested in hanging out in the virtual reality world. And we've talked about this. The more the virtual reality gets prominent, the more I just don't like. The more I think about it, the more I'm just not really interested in being super involved with that. It's just not something I want to be involved with, and I just don't know if I'll want to have a driverless car all that much. I'm not certain of it. So, yeah. So,
it's funny because I honestly think I'm the inverse. I don't want to use it now, but if it becomes super rampant, then I'd start using it when I could trust it more.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be a guinea pig on a self-driving car, but if all of society moved towards where just people stop driving, I wouldn't be, like, super opposed. The only thing I don't like about it is the concept that then you're in a car and you have no control over where you go. I'd be okay with a self-driving car with a manual override if you wanted it. I wouldn't want to get into a car if I didn't have the ability to drive it myself as well as the primary function. But if you want to, you can kind of leave it in self-driving mode.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't, well, it's funny you say that. So some of the pros to self-driving cars that I was thinking about. So number one pro about self-driving cars is increased safety in theory, right? If the cars are self-driving, you know, they're not going to be subject to a person's normal judgment errors or, you know, them making bad decisions and drinking or arguing or having to worry about somebody eating fries and not paying attention to the road and hitting somebody or getting into a crash. So, yeah, the common human error would be supposedly brushed to the side. And this is a big one, traffic flow. In theory, if all cars are working through this network and management done by a computer, each should have traffic be little to non-existent. You know, because part of the reason traffic is the way traffic is because people are stupid, right? There's a crash, and people could easily just be on the right lane, but people slow down to look at the crash. And it happens almost every time. You go down 95, and you're in traffic, and you're like, what is the holdup? And then you get past one little thing, and it immediately speeds up, and you're like, dang, we're slowing everybody down by 25 to 45 minutes for this stupid thing right here. Like, that's crazy. Or construction, right? So improved traffic patterns, in theory, would be one of the great benefits of self-driving cars. Increased accessibility to transportation, right? Many children obviously can't drive on their own because they're not old enough. Self-driving cars may be able to help with that. You know, if they're self-driving cars, there may be less reason for school buses, less incidents between kids, right? In the school bus, sometimes on the school bus you hear about like violence and bullying and stuff like that. We'll get rid of that if everybody just gets their own ride to school, ride to and from school. Also, you know, some of the problems with Uber has been like crimes, right? You hear stories about where an Uber driver assaults a passenger, or a passenger assaults a Uber driver. This would not, you know, there would be no more crimes during Uber drives. And then there'd be some economic benefits too. You know, it would potentially increase entrepreneurship in the sense that, you know, well, here's the way I say entrepreneurship. Tesla is about to have their own robo-taxis. And one thing that, from what I understand, Elon Musk has hinted at is that you would be able to use a Tesla to create passive income by letting your Tesla drive people around. So that, in theory, could help with entrepreneurship. as well as it would also reduce personal car ownership liability. So that is those are some of the things that I've thought about when it comes to self-driving cars. Now we can also talk about some cons, because you know me, I'm always someone who can see the negative of things. So, safety concerns. What about cybersecurity? If all cars are running on these computers, electric cars, self-driving cars are run by some type of, processing system. If they are hacked, well, you may not be going to the destination that you originally had the car driving you in, right? You say, hey, I'm going to go to work. Somebody hacks it. Well, now you're going to a very suspicious location. That is not good. As well as, we've all seen scary movies like iRobot, right? Your car could end up being your murderer, right? Not trying to be on some conspiracy stuff, but iRobot, I remember there was a scene in there where the car was acting up and doing some very bad things. Even, what was the movie we watched this past year? The Obama movie where the Tesla cars were running into each other.
Yeah.
What was the name of it? Yeah. Right. I mean, that in theory could happen. And then obviously there's economic disruption. I think I was looking up some statistics, and it was saying somewhere between in the range of 6 to 7 million jobs have to do with vehicles in terms of like managing vehicles. Those jobs are gone. If now you have self-driving cars that are replacing bus drivers, trash trucks, the everyday commute, commuting between going from bar hopping.
The commuting from going between bars?
Yeah, like if people are going from one bar to another, right? They don't have to Uber anymore. You don't have to use a taxi either. Uh-huh. It's gone. That job is gone. It's a big disruption in the industry, for good and for bad. And then privacy concerns. If you're one of those people who happens to be a little cautious about if your phone's recording you, wait till you start having to wonder if your car's recording you. Now you're wondering, are these Google cars or Tesla cars, are they collecting our data, our videos of us? Are we in a constant surveillance state now? You used to have privacy in your car. You had a motor vehicle, motor vehicle running on gas. Most complicated thing on there that was electronic was your radio, right? Now you got to worry about whether your car's listening to you. You can't have a conversation with your family in the car without the surveillance state. And that is very Orwellian.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So, I went on a little monologue there, but you're more than welcome to chime in at this point. Tell me what are you thinking?
I'll just react to yours because I think we had a lot of similar thoughts. The school bus thing, I don't know if that's a pro, actually. I think you were like, hey, it's a small detail, but you're like, it'd be great if kids just go straight there. I think the school bus is a developmental component kids should have growing up. Yes, there's problems that happen on school buses, but I feel like as a youth, you need to be put in group settings and learn group behavior. And like, if everyone was being driven to school, I don't know if that's you just said that was a pro. I just don't know if that's a pro to me.
Okay, we can cut this part out of the podcast if we want to, but Teo, we didn't have the school bus like that growing up.
That's okay, but I think it's a thing.
We developed just fine.
I think it's a good part of development. I think we missed out on that part of development.
All right, I wouldn't be like, I don't think there'd be a massive.
Well, I didn't think it would be a massive benefit.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
You can leave that in the pod if you want, you. I think we're going to leave that in the pod.
It don't matter.
We keep it straight here, folks.
Oh, yeah,
Miguel doesn't think that's a good point. We're not cutting that. That's an arguable point. I didn't take a school bus to that, but when we took school buses when we did like projects and trips and stuff, we were on a school bus. I thought those were developmental times. Yeah. My football team took a school bus to and from games. It was a developmental time. I don't know what world you lived in, but I've been on buses before.
I'm not saying we never went on buses, but I'm just saying like I don't know if it's necessarily keeping people from being developmental at all. It's
I
fine.
think it's an element of your development is being put in group settings and largely when it's unmonitored settings. So, yeah, I think the school bus is a good activity and shouldn't be taken away. It's a common mode of transportation, but it's also part of childhood development. That's like saying, hey, everyone can play on their video games in school too. They don't need to go outside and have recess with each other. I think that's an important part of children development. Group settings in real life, in person together.
Well,
So,
in theory, there will also be self-driving buses.
okay, so then you said we wouldn't need buses anymore.
I more meant the bus driver job.
Okay. Well, regardless, it was my counterpoint is I like buses. I think they're a good part of society.
Tail loves this bus.
The other thing is you
Bus
said interestingly that entrepreneurship is starting because of it where you can lease your car out for passive income. I also don't know if I would designate that entrepreneurship. I think that's just buying a car and leasing it out for passive income. That's not really like an entrepreneurial activity in my mind.
I mean, I'm sure you could spin it in a way to make it entrepreneurial, but sure. Yeah, I guess if you get to I guess if that's the only component of your business, sure, it's just a little lease, little passive.
Okay. Anyway, so I'm just kind of going through, reacting to what you said.
Yeah.
I agree that the cybersecurity component is the biggest thing that I would be concerned about. Is you have this device, and I actually think the route you were going down at the end. If you're talking about a component of your life where you're being tracked exactly where you go, you're controlled on how you get to and from there. Not something I'm really looking for out of my car. There's a few things I want my car to do for me, and the first and foremost is get me to and from a location safely. So if I get that, I think it's checking the box, and then after that, I don't really need a lot of that other stuff they're saying. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think it's the inevitable kind of path we're going on. But I think like everything else, we'll have pros and cons. So I didn't really have too much to add to the self-driving component. I think you hit on a lot of the big points. I think it's going to be the one thing I will say about self-driving cars is I don't know if it's ever going to work when you have both humans and self-driving cars. You kind of have to go all in one or the other. If you're going to have self-driving cars with humans driving and the self-driving car has to react to human irrationality and it makes a mistake, now you're blaming a company for that. Where it's almost like we all have this shared accountability when we drive together that like you have to be responsible, and if someone does something wrong, they're personally liable. What happens if a self-driving car injures someone? Who's liable in that situation?
Yeah.
Who is responsible? And I think if you had all self-driving cars, it would work. It could really work because, like you said, it's an interconnected network. And if so long as you don't have a cyber attack, theoretically, it could operate perfectly. And everyone's kind of moving. But if you have self-driving cars and humans driving, and a human does an irrational move to the self-driving car's program, is that the person's fault or is that the car's fault? And if the car malfunctions and actually does something with its auto-driving program, is that the company's fault? Like, who do we blame for that? Because the one thing we have to have is accountability in this world, and now we're mixing real humans and robotic systems, and we have to have a way to delegate between who's responsible for what and who's accountable for what. So I think that there's a world where self-driving cars could be great, and I think there's, some barriers to entry that they're going to have to deal with to get to that point. But what I'm most concerned about is when we're in a world where we're half human, half self-driving car, and how that world looks. And I feel like that's actually where we're approaching now. If you're saying we have these pilot programs, if that's happening, well, in all the cities you mentioned, there's still regular people driving there. It's not like you created like a little bubble and they're all just driving on their own to see if it works or not. Like, it's a pretty crazy thing to be beta testing is human lives interacting with these pilot programs. But I guess that's how any development happens. But put it this way. If a self-driving car hit my car, I would be doubly pissed. I'd be more pissed than if a human did it to me. Because I'm like, if your self-driving car isn't programmed right and it hits me, I'm not happy about that. But the rest of your points I agree with.
I guess another thing that I just really want to hammer home, if I haven't already hammered it.
Hammer.
If all cars are self-driving and we're at the point where humans are no longer driving cars, one solid cyber attack and we're cooked. You know what I mean? Like, here's the sad part. Everyone talks about how there's not great cybersecurity, even at the highest levels. Like, people are still getting hacked left and right. And a lot of times you don't even realize until it's too late that you've been hacked. And dude, like, the government has been hacked. Some of our most integral companies in the US have been hacked. If we have millions of people on the roads relying on self-driving cars on secure networks and they get hacked, you could see mass casualties in minutes. And if these self-driving cars are also built in a way where like a human is like completely subject to the whim of the car because they're like, oh, human errors are what causes the accidents. I mean, you could find millions of vulnerable humans all at one time, all at one moment, you know. And it makes me think this is actually not the way to go. I don't know if the pros outweigh the cons, and it makes people actually subject. It also makes people subject to companies. Because what if a company decides to cancel you and now you can't drive anywhere?
Yeah.
You know, or the government gets to the point where they're running companies. Because people are always like, oh, you think the government's trying to take over your life and all that stuff. I'm like, well, it happens in other countries. Why can't it happen in the U.S.? You know, people have to keep that in mind. People are so comfortable being like, oh, that'll never happen in the U.S. And it's like, oh, don't say that. Like, worldwide, there's been tyranny. We're basically the tyranny podcast, right? We talk about tyranny like every other podcast now. But it's true. Tyranny has been a historical problem all across the world for hundreds of years, and it's still a problem in many parts of the world. And if we got to the point where the U.S. ever became tyrannical, like really, really tyrannical, and self-driving cars were at the whim of the government to some degree, oh, like, talk about complete control of what you can and can't do with your life. And also, you know, you thought COVID shutdowns were bad before. Imagine a car shutdown. The government just says, hey, stay home, and you can't leave. Like, that's one thing that we had during COVID. If you needed to go somewhere, you could go outside, get in your car, go do what you need to do, get out, get some fresh air. Car shutdown, it's a wrap. You're only going where you can walk.
I don't think we intended it this way, but it's a perfect segue from the last episode, episode 19, where we were talking about technology, and we were saying two things that I think tie into this is, one, the more technology you have, the more reliant you are on your technology to exist. Like, it's great if you have technology, but then if you forget kind of how to be resourceful, you are stuck because you've relied on this tool. And a lot of the things we had before were things that you really had to be able to control to do, but the more we give technology the control over each of those elements in our life, then that technology is now in the hands of someone else. And if you don't know how to operate without that technology, you're stuck, you know? So there's that. And then two, what we were talking about is the more secure you want to make something from a technology standpoint, the less technologically advanced you need it. Like, that was a big point we made in the last one, where we were saying, you know, some of our most cyber secure places are places with the least access to cyber. You know, so when we're adding cyber to every element of our life, we're exposing ourselves to more and more cyber vulnerabilities. That's just the only way to describe it. The more cyber you have in the life, the more vulnerable you are to cybersecurity attacks. So it's a dangerous game to be playing where, although it's great to have technology, if we're having technology in lieu of having backup contingency plans where we can actually still operate without the technology, that's a vulnerability risk. That's a real problem, where then you're looking around if that technology goes down and you're like, well, what do I do? What am I supposed to do now? I need this thing to do whatever I'm trying to do. And that thing goes down, you're stuck. We have to at least keep a level of like human resourcefulness that if those things go down, the world doesn't stop. You can't have so much technology in your lives that the world is like completely dependent on it being perfectly operating at all times. Because the point we made, the world's getting more and more risky from a cyber standpoint. You're hearing about more incidents that are happening, and the incidents are getting bigger, and the incidents have more impact. And one of these days, there's going to be a cyber incident where we all look around and we're like, what were we thinking? Why didn't we have a backup plan for if this went down? We have too much dependent on cyber right now in an environment where it's too easy to hack cyber. we don't have the defensive technologies in place and systems in place to make us walk around as comfortably as we're walking around, like nothing will ever happen to our systems. We're constantly in a state of being one cyber incident away from anarchy. And I think that's a scary thing that people just aren't going to appreciate until it happens, and then they're going to be like, wow, let's never do it that way again. And to your point, you add on self-driving cars as like a mass adopted thing. That's another huge area that we're relying on. At least right now, like you said, if everything else goes down, so long as you got a tank of gas in your car, you're good. You can go where you need to go until that gas runs out. So you have one level. If you're in a completely self-driving tech car, that system goes down. You're going 0 miles. You're walking.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's a serious problem and a risk factor.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. That's wild.
We're gonna see it one day. I don't know when.
Any no?
No, that's all I gotta say about that.
Okay.
You're the Tesla guy. You keep up with Tesla more than I do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Robo-taxis, they're talking about that. I think October 4th is when Elon Musk is supposed to go into detail about what's going on with the robo-taxis. But yeah, no, I mean, things are developing in the self-driving car world. I just think it's very interesting. Don't know where we're going with it. Now, what is the next subject?
Just to let you guys know, to cover what you said, where they service Phoenix, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Austin.
Austin. Yeah, that makes sense. Austin seems like a city that would do that.
Yeah.
4 big cities. Those aren't, they're not like beta testing in small cities. Those are big, hustling, bustling cities where there's a lot of activity going on. It makes sense on one side, but it's surprising on the other side.
Yeah, no, it really is. What are we doing?
We have food industry we can talk about.
Yeah. So when it comes to the food industry, there has been a lot of talk about how in America we're having a problem with our health due to how over-processed our foods are and how full of, well, there's so much discussion, but some of the things that we know are a problem is like how much sugar is in our food, portion sizes, sodium levels, carbs. I mean, it's pretty crazy, a lot of Americans have weight issues in terms of like staying within a good fit range for them. Some people want to go by BMI, some people want to go by what they feel. It is subjective depending on who you're talking to. What is the right place for one to be when it comes to their health options? But I think something we all recognize is the food industry here is doing a pretty bad job. And it's interesting because, the FDA supposedly is reviewing everything. And it's very interesting what the FDA and all these like government agencies are like running campaigns on to stop and what they don't seem to care all that much about, It's like, for example, you can look at almost any corner and you'll find a McDonald's or a Wendy's or, insert fast food chain. And that like the majority of the food options on those menus, they're like terrible for you. They have way too high calories for one meal. And they also like, especially you feel it the older you get, they're bad for you. Like you feel very sluggish. You feel kind of sick afterwards sometimes. Like it's not good food. And it's bad. So, at the same time, Americans have the freedom to choose what they want to eat. But I don't know. It almost begs the question. We regulate everything. Should we be regulating American diets through the fast food industries? I don't know. What have you been thinking about on this?
It's a tricky subject when you phrase it in that frame. I think that it's just an interesting topic. The more you really dig into it and really think, why are things the way they are, you really start to question things. we've gotten to the point where it is harder to be healthy with your diet than it is to be unhealthy with your diet. That's just matter of fact. Everyone knows that. It is easier and cheaper to eat unhealthily in America than it is to eat healthily. If you want a cheap option for food that's quick, very high probability you're eating something unhealthy. However, if you want to spend more money, then you can start saying, oh, there's other types of food products that I can get. But in terms of what you were talking about with the regulation and stuff too, I mean, I don't know. I think it's kind of weird that the more the government has gotten involved in how food is regulated in America, the worse our food is getting in America. Like, it's just very weird of a correlation that the government's all right, we're going to get involved in how we regulate food, and we're going to be very involved in how it's manufactured and produced, and we have a whole agency dedicated to this. And you look around at the food we're eating today, and you borderline could call half of this stuff poison. Like, without exaggeration, half of the food that's being given to people is poison, and we don't call it that. We call it unhealthy, but it's literally poison. If you look at something that is 75% sugar, has, X amount of saturated fats, it's using these processed preservatives, it's using, these chemicals that you can't even read on the label, but they're throwing it in there. That's literally chemical poison they're putting into our food, and we all know it. You go to a fast food chain, and you know that it's not real meat you're eating, or it's drowned in grease, or whatever the case might be. An objective person looks at that and says, that's an unhealthy thing to put in your body. And regardless of the fact of that we have the freedom to have it, the government's got involved in how food is allowed to be given, but somehow that's not being stopped. I don't know. I just think it's a really weird correlation that the more we had government involvement, the worse the food's getting. And if you look back in time, people eating healthier foods that were more natural, and we're not going in the right direction. The nation isn't getting healthier. When you look at national trends, we are an unhealthier nation. And I think that contributes to a lot of the problems we have in this country that people don't realize. If you're eating unhealthy, you feel really bad after it, which impacts your mental. And then when your mental's in a bad spot and your physical's in a bad spot, you as a person are not in a good place to be operating. America is sick, literally and figuratively, and it's because of the food we're eating and the information we're having put into our minds. And a huge component of that is the food we're eating. And it's unhealthy food. And it's everywhere available. You can get fast food chains, but there's not a lot of fast, healthy options for people to choose from. We're literally being why is America getting overweight all of a sudden? Why is it? And yeah, it's a problem, but why is that the options people have to choose from in America is 99% unhealthy fast food or 99% processed food in the supermarket? When you go in the supermarket, walk around. Next time you go in a supermarket, look around and compare how many unhealthy things there are versus healthy things. And also look at where they're situated in the store. You walk into a supermarket and the first thing they'll have before you even get between the double doors is usually a bag of chips or something. You're constantly surrounded by unhealthy food. So if you want healthy food in the supermarket, you got to go to the healthy food section. And the rest is processed frozen food or processed fatty food or sodas. Soda's cheaper than water. Soda's cheaper than water in America. And we're why are people unhealthy? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Another thing that I was thinking about, those are all good points, by the way. Another thing I was thinking about is man, the government agencies, they've done a really good job having campaigns against drugs and alcohol, which I think is a good thing. They have strong campaigns on smoking tobacco, chewing tobacco, all types of different drugs that they deem to be, terrible substances for you. And I don't necessarily disagree with any of those things. Those things can cause death as well as all types of other injuries. But, I looked up what are the top 10 causes of death in America. Number 1 is heart disease. And heart disease is brought about for different reasons, but it includes high blood pressure, cholesterol, physical inactivity, as well as other things. Just a lot of it has to do with unhealthy diet and even excessive alcohol use, right? So heart disease, number 1, and then number 7, and you have to think of it with a little bit of a caveat, but type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Now, obviously, if you're born with diabetes, I mean, you're born with diabetes. Nothing you can do about it. But many people develop diabetes through an unhealthy lifestyle, which includes a bad diet and inactivity, right? But there are plenty of countries around the world where people aren't like super active. You know, they're not like hitting the gym every day, walking all that much. They're just eating relatively healthy food, and they're able to, take care of their weight and stay pretty fit. But in America, we have a lot of people who they have trouble walking up the stairs. They have trouble walking. And you would think that if we're seeing issues like this at a pretty high level, we might want to attack the root of the issue. And a lot of the root of this issue, in my opinion, is fast food. Here's the thing. The benefits of the fast food is in the name. It's fast and it's food, right? We need food every day. I've heard a saying, and it's so true, but like, I think part of the reason people have food addiction issues is because you have to eat every day. You don't have to smoke every day. You don't have to drink alcohol every day. Like, those are things you could literally, like, when you're fighting those addictions, you can go without doing those things, literally, and you'll be okay. You'll be better, right? Everyone has to eat at least once a day. And the problem is, many people, especially as they become adults, they have to work. And if you're working and you get home and you don't really have all that much time left with your free time, spending 20 to 30 or maybe even an hour, 20 to 30 minutes or even an hour to cook a good meal, you might just be like, screw it. I'd rather just get McDonald's, or I'd rather just order pizza. It's much more convenient. It's time saving. And frankly, it tastes great, right? Listen, I love a good pizza. I know it's not good for me, but damn, if I could eat a stuffed crust pepperoni pizza every day and it was good for me, I would do it every day. I would do it every day. Obviously, I can't, but I would if I could. And many people will eat it every day, even if it's not good for them, right? And I think therein lies a big problem. If it was possible, and that's why I'm saying if. I don't know for certain, but I feel like it could be done. If it was possible that fast food could be made healthily, it would solve a huge problem in America, which is Americans being fit. Now, many people will say that's impossible, and maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe I'm just an optimist. But I think there is a way. If certain incentives were made for fast food companies and maybe restaurants in general, there would be healthier options for Americans. And especially if like government agencies took the same aggressive campaign strategies that they made against drugs and alcohol and tobacco uses, maybe we could get the fast food industry in line from giving Americans such terrible, unhealthy food options. But they don't try it. They don't try it. And like I said, number 1, heart disease. Number 7, diabetes. These are 2 of the 10 leading causes for death in America. And we don't really go after those the same way we go after tobacco and alcohol. Because one could say maybe tobacco and alcohol was way worse in the 80s, 70s, 60s. I'm sure they were, right? Our generation, we were talking about this the other day, our generation doesn't really drink as much as our parents or their parents, right? And I think a lot of that has to do with the campaigns we were given to as kids. Don't drink, say no to drugs, don't smoke, smoking's so bad. I mean, you hate the fact that like anybody smokes cigarettes. You think it's terrible. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying, if you had grown up in the 70s or 80s, maybe you wouldn't have felt that way growing up because there weren't these campaigns that were constantly shot at you as a kid. But between the campaigns and probably some real life experiences, you are so against smoking cigarettes, right? If there had been these campaigns against eating bad food, maybe you wouldn't be eating as much McDonald's, Wendy's, or, whatever fast food. But I don't know, just some thoughts.
I think that's a great point. Where is the campaign to eat healthier? Like, where is that? I haven't seen it. Why isn't the government prioritizing healthier food for all of our people? It's like I was saying earlier. America's literally and figuratively sick. When you look around at Americans and you see what they're putting into their bodies and then all of the problems that are happening to Americans, you don't got to be a rocket scientist to know that the food's unhealthy and it's making us all sick. Like, I don't know why that almost sounds like conspiratorial, but it's like as obvious as anything can be. And I do believe that if there's a cultural movement, you can change kind of whole trends of countries. And if America got together and was like, hey, we need to really become healthier in the foods that we're giving to our citizens, we could change that. It's not so pie in the sky. I just think it's allowed, and it's not like as much discouraged, that there's no reason for these corporations and these companies to stop putting it in. It's cheaper, it's addictive, and people want it once they get hooked on it. Why would they not put that in their food if there's no negative ramifications? At a certain point, you have to look around, and I think citizens, first and foremost, but as well as top down all the way through the government, should not only not be encouraging it, but they should actually be discouraging unhealthy food. Of all the things for the government to be involved in, I wouldn't be mad if the government finally started saying, hey, we don't want our citizens being given this toxic, unhealthy food. Get in line, corporations and food producers, and make it healthy. But I'm not hearing that trend. I'm not hearing the government knocking down McDonald's and Taco Bell and Pizza Hut door and being like, hey, make your stuff healthier. You're making it toxic for our citizens. I'm not hearing citizens really say it too much either. I think we all know it. But we're not like outraged at the fact that these companies are making things that if you look at a label, you can't read it because it has all these ingredients you don't understand, and you still know it's unhealthy for you. We're all like accepting it and kind of like discouraged at the fact that those are our options, and I think we'd want better options. But at the same time, people aren't revolting at the fact that we're being given toxic food, and the government's not really putting any regulations or penalties on big unhealthy food providers. So no shit that America's unhealthy. And everyone's like, why is it happening this way? Or worse, they're saying that that's okay. It's not okay to eat unhealthy. It's not good to give children unhealthy food. You shouldn't be growing up overweight. That's not good for you. It's bad for your development. It's bad for your psyche. You feel worse when you eat unhealthy food. We should be giving our kids the best chance possible to be in an environment where they can learn as best as possible. If you think putting bad food into their systems is helping them, you're lying to your face. It might be the convenient way to feed groups of kids, but we should be giving kids healthy, great food all the time. They shouldn't have pizza day at school should be an anomaly. It shouldn't be served every day at cafeterias. We shouldn't be giving our kids saturated fats and sugars and then saying, hey, why are they having a tough time focusing in class? You're either going to be slumped over because you're so tired because you have fooditis, or you have so much sugar in your system you're bouncing off the walls. And that's what we're giving to kids. We're giving kids crazy amounts of access to sugar, and then they're like, why are they misbehaving? They have so much energy and they can't focus, and we have all these attention problems. Well, maybe a component of why that's happening is because we're literally feeding all of our kids crap. Maybe that's a problem. And then it just goes all the way to adulthood. And now you've trained your kids from youth to adulthood that the easy, convenient food is what you should be eating. As opposed to from a young age saying, eat healthy food, eat vegetables, eat good sources of protein. All the stuff that they should be eating, they don't even know that. And then we expect them to start building those habits as adults? That's not how this works.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. And as a matter of fact, I'm one of those kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah, talk from personal experience.
I mean, from personal experience, like, and I'm not trying to put my mom on blast. I love my mom, but like, you know, I was a chubby fat kid at certain points in elementary school. I had more chubby years than non-chubby years growing up through elementary school. And I remember, you know, what's funny? I remember my doctor, my mom, and my karate teacher at different points were like, "Hey, you gotta lose some weight." And I remember as a kid blaming myself a lot for my weight issues. But when I look back, I was like, what the hell were they talking about? My mom used to make me go, I'll never forget this. And I've told this story to Teo and to my friends, but I'll never forget. I did karate, and at a certain point, I was actually losing a lot of weight when I was like, I think it was like 4th grade, and I actually got pretty slim. And then when I was in 5th grade, my parents were busy with work, and they stopped taking me to do physical activity, as in karate or anything else, in the 5th grade. I was just home all the time, and they would just buy me fast food, and I was eating. I gained a lot of weight, and then when my parents had more time to start taking me to do physical activity, I turned into a balloon. I was a little grape. I showed up to karate class, and I couldn't compete with the friends that I had grown up with like I was prior, and it was embarrassing. The kids that I was actually beating up in our sparring matches were beating the hell out of me. I was slower, and I was just straight up out of shape. And I remember my karate teacher sat me down with my mom and was like, Miguel, you got to lose some weight. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, you know what you got to be eating. And I was like, yeah, I know. As if I have control over the menu at my house. As if I'm the one doing the grocery shopping. He's like, you have to lose some weight. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, you know what you got to eat. I didn't really know what I was going to eat. I was fat as shit. Like what did I know? I literally never ate the right things. I just ate whatever. If we weren't eating fast food McDonald's, we were eating pupusas, which like isn't on the best part of the food pyramid, right? It's literally like carbs and some meat and cheese in the inside. It's not great for you. And as he's telling me this, my mom's like, yeah, Miguel, you really need to eat better. Now I look back, I'm like, yeah, I did. Why did you? And we finished talking. I had just finished doing karate. This was a meeting post my karate workout. We get in the car. We're on the way home. Mom's like, so what do you want to eat? I was like, I don't know. I got to eat something healthy. And she was like, okay, how about chicken nuggets at McDonald's? And I was literally like, Mom, he just said I have to stop eating unhealthy food. She's like, it's chicken nuggets. And I was like, okay. And then me being a fat ass, I was like, can I get a McFlurry? And she's like, yeah, you just did karate. like that was something that like now I look back and I'm like, that was so silly. That was crazy. What would you think about? I had the doctor also want to do a checkup in 5th grade. She like noticed how much weight I gained. My doctor was looking at me. You know what else is crazy? The adults in this triangle of people. Instead of the adults looking at my mom and be like, yo, can you stop feeding this kid so much goddamn McDonald's? They were looking at me like, you need to eat better. you got to start eating fruit and vegetables. And I'm in there like, yeah. Going home and opening up my closet, and all I have is like Tricks and Fruit Loops. Like there are no vegetables at my house in this time. Literally all we have is like pancakes. I'm not even gonna go through it. Just know it was all terrible food.
It's such a good point, and I think that we're in a weird spot because neither of us have kids. So whenever we say anything about how the youth should be addressed, I guess we don't have a leg to stand on to a certain component. But at the end of the day, right is right and wrong is wrong, right? So I'll say it. If there is an overweight child, no one should be blaming the child for being overweight if their diet is not good. Parents are in control of the food source their children have. We should be looking at parents and saying, give your kids healthy food. We shouldn't be looking at society and being like, why are all our kids unhealthy? They're lazy or whatever. Like they're kids. Like there's a reason there's adults responsible for them. We as adults are responsible for the food source that is provided to the children of the United States of America. And we look at kids like it's the kids' fault for being overweight. It's the adults' fault for not giving them vast amounts of healthy food options and restricting their access to unhealthy foods. You can talk freedom in America all day long, and I'm with you. We have to make sure it's a free country. But there's a responsibility of adults to make sure that the kids are being given the right food sources, and they're not at the whims of the kids who want bad food. I'm not blaming kids for wanting bad food. I'm blaming adults for giving kids bad food, and then that's why they're overweight. It's not the kids' fault. The kids need to be raised in an environment where the only option they have is healthy food. If they're choosing bad food, it's because you're allowing them to be around bad food, and at some point in that process, an adult is responsible. Whether it's the restaurant, the parent, or the school, which are the only 3 places kids can get food, kids shouldn't be having access to unhealthy food everywhere. And then we're talking about, like, why are kids unhealthy? And again, I've said it multiple times. The country is unhealthy, and it literally starts with the food we're putting in the country, which impacts the mind of the people in the country, which impacts the body and the mind, and that's where your people are. Their state of being is based on their body and their mind. And if we're giving them bad food, we're already missing on 50% of the equation, and that 50% directly impacts the other 50%. If America wanted to be in a better state overall, just talking blanketly, a simple, easy solution is make healthier food available and restrict unhealthy food. Let's try that out for size and then see what America looks like. I have a feeling we're going to be in a much better spot. A good chunk of our problems are going to get solved directly or indirectly if America was eating healthier. It's crazy how unhealthy our food is.
Yeah. It is wild.
And we know it. We all know it. We all know how unhealthy our food is.
Yeah. And you know what? I think it's possible to make them a little healthier.
A lot healthier.
Possible. Yeah, a lot healthier. But if we were just going to start with a little healthier, I think we could do that. I think we could do that, which leads me, well, anything economical you want to touch on before we go to...
We can go to the 5.
Wrap
we
it to
can
the last
wrap
5.
it up with the...
Okay, let's wrap it up to the last 5. So, Teo and I, we've been talking. And do you want to go first or do I? But basically, we're going to talk about 5 things Congress could pass now.
Yeah. Single item bills.
Single item bills.
Just get it done. Don't wrap it into anything else. Don't make it complicated. Everyone agrees on it. Simple things that make the country better right away if you just did it. Let's not make this a whole thing.
You want to do your 5?
You go ahead.
Okay. So my top 5 bills Congress could pass right now to make the country better. 1, stop institutional investments from companies like BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, and Vanguard from being able to purchase single-family homes in America. I mean, there's already a housing shortage. I don't think, and with so many things they could be investing in, I don't think it's good for the country for them to be purchasing properties and turning them into rental properties as these massive institutional investors that can literally outbid any single family. Number 2, tax break incentives for food companies that make menus with meals under $10. So essentially make a certain amount of menu meals under $10. Because now I go to Chipotle, my Chipotle is at least like $11, $12, $14, $15. I mean, it's so hard to find a whole meal for under $10. And it didn't used to be like that. You know, we're just talking about how, like, you used to be able to get like 3 or 4 things at Taco Bell for under $10. You can't do that anymore. But I think if we gave tax incentives to certain companies and maybe even small businesses, we might actually see more $10 under $10 meals. You know, and even that might be on the higher range, but maybe not. Not that all the meals have to be under $10, but they were to offer it. Pass a law that says that any time, and shout out to Warren Buffett for this one. So basically, pass a law that fires Congress if the GDP is more than 3%, all city members are ineligible for re-election. So shout out to Warren Buffett. He mentioned this one. This is something I would pass. Let's get the budget under control. They'll never do it, but it's a good thought. Next one, number 4, ban corporate donations to political parties. I just don't think it's super helpful. If they want to discuss policy ideas with Congress members, I think that's fine. But I think when we have these political groups, and I understand the Supreme Court has ruled on it, and I think from my understanding it's technically constitutional, but doesn't mean we couldn't potentially change the rules on that and ban it. And then here's another one, also in the vein of food. Tax incentives for companies that have dollar menus that have snacks that are actually under $1 and healthy. So those are my 5.
It's a good list. All right. Well, we'll debrief. Why don't I go through my 5 and then we can kind of talk through the thought process on a few of those.
Hold on. I'm also just going to re-say this. So it's a little bit, I just want to really go into that last point. My bad. So the tax incentives for the $1 menu, those meals have to be healthy. So healthy $1 snacks, a healthy snack wrap, or a healthy 5-layer burrito. Yeah, make it healthy. Somehow, find a way. Find a way to make it healthy. But go ahead.
All right.
For $1.
That's a tricky bill.
It's a tricky bill. I didn't say it's easy.
I thought we were going with.
I didn't say it's easy.
All right. Hopefully mine could be a little different than yours. I think we have a good variety on them. We're really getting top 10 because if you have your 5 and my 5, though we'll talk through them at the end. But my top 5 single item bills Congress should pass today. Number 1, Congress should be restricted from trading stocks. I've talked about it once. I've talked about it 100 times. But at the end of the day, it is mind-blowing to me that Congress is allowed to essentially insider trade, and it is just a exemplification of how corrupt they are. 2, big pharma and pharma in general can no longer advertise medicine. We're one of very few countries where this is allowed, and it is mind-blowing to me that big pharma is spending millions of dollars to market medicine. That's not how this should work. Medicine should be created, and doctors should know it's available, but this shouldn't be like a for-profit component. Medicine is to heal people from sicknesses and illnesses. It's not a for-profit dynamic where we're marketing it like it's some supply that you buy on Amazon. That's not how this is supposed to work, and I think it is a huge component to some of the most toxic components of big pharma. 3, foreign countries and entities are banned from owning U.S. land. It should never be allowed that a foreign entity owns U.S. land. It is a national security risk, and it's just something that doesn't make sense, and I think we need to nip that one in the butt. But so no more foreign ownership of any piece of U.S. soil at all. Number 4, the education system should have financial literacy introduced from kindergarten through 12th grade, which means from the moment you're born and going through the education system, you're learning financial literacy, and that makes America smarter as a country. It makes people more fiscally responsible, and I think it would actually help the economy and be good for our citizens that they know how finances work and how they should operate their budget and their money, as opposed to this current thing where everyone's just told to figure it out on your own. It should be part of the education system. Take a few of these other wonky ideas out of the education system, and let's add that one in. And number 5, Congress should no longer receive pensions and their health care that's different from the private sector. Just because you were in Congress doesn't mean you're entitled to these crazy good benefit packages when you're out of it. It's a civil servant position, and it isn't something people should be looking to do to have to make money or to have as your retirement plan. You go into Congress with the thought process you're serving the nation, you do your bit, and you get out. Bonus one, put a term limit on them so they can't do it anyway. So those were my top 5. Did you have any thoughts on mine, or I had a few thoughts on yours?
No, we've kind of talked about those before, so I'm not like, none of those are super like.
Can I push back on one of yours?
Sure.
And you tell me your thinking. Why is the government subsidizing cheaper meals? You said government gives tax credits to business doing cheaper meals. Isn't that just the government subsidizing food?
I mean, it gives tax incentives. I mean, we want, first of all, there is thoughts, and I've thought about it, that potentially part of the reason food prices are out is because companies are price gouging. Part of the reason they're price gouging is because the cost of many things have gone up. But that being said, my thought process is some of these meals that have been like going through the roof, like it gives opportunity for even small businesses to bring down prices and not have to pay as many taxes. Better for the consumer, better for the companies, give some release to the companies that make food or that are serving food.
Yeah.
Not.
I'm not sold on that one.
Okay.
I probably wouldn't. I don't really think the government should be involved.
The government's involved in so many things. We might as well be involved in something that actually helps consumers.
Well, that's how governments turn into, well, we might as well do this because we could do, like, no, keep them out of it.
Okay.
In my opinion. I just think that when government's getting involved in food pricing and subsidizing corporations for cheaper food, like, that's just the government involved in something. And I guess my thought process is, like everything else, once you start getting them more and more involved in that, I think the cons are going to start outweighing whatever pros you think of cheaper food.
Well, it's not a subsidization. It's not a subsidization. It's literally a tax incentive.
That's a subsidization.
I don't think
Like,
so.
what do you think a tax credit is? It's the government crediting your taxes.
I've always classified subsidizing as like grants.
It's a different version of the same thing. Here we're giving you money. Here we're not charging you money. The net the same as the government is making it financially lucrative for you to do an activity.
So would you consider buying a house subsidizing if you get certain tax benefits for home ownership?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I don't. But that's okay. We
Yeah.
agree to disagree.
That's how the tax system works.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incentive. I think an incentive and subsidizing are two separate things. They may be similar. They may be look the same, but it's two different brothers, right? Couple twins. One's more handsome. One's not as handsome. You know, they have different, things that they're good at. Anyways, yeah, I mean, listen, those are 5 things I would suggest. I think it'd be a good thing. We'd like to, counter inflation a little bit. That might be a solid counter. That's something that everyone can benefit from, because that's the thing. Part of the problem with tax incentives and subsidizing of things is it tends to be no one benefits from it. This is literally something everyone would benefit for. Less than $10 meal, like everyone eats. Everyone eats.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't want to go down the full rabbit hole, but I think from like an economic standpoint, then you're putting caps on food.
No,
I
didn't say make it. I didn't say make a law that puts a cap on food. I didn't say that. Tax incentive, like there's so many tax incentives for different things. Like,
how much is the incentive?
Don't know. Didn't write that out.
But I'm saying, how much are they doing? Because they'll just look at it as a cost benefit.
Yeah,
they'll say, if I charge $18 for this burger, I'm not even saving as much as if I charge $9 and get their tax credit. So why would I do that?
Don't know. I'm not. Just in there.
I'm just
a thought.
It's your bill.
No, I hear you.
You made the bill.
Yeah, I made the bill.
I'm pressing the bill. I'm saying, hey, you got to bring this to the lobby of Congress and do this. The Congress member just gave you this question and you want him to vote yes because you said, I don't know.
No, this is a sketch. This is a skeleton.
Oh, mine are things I want passed today. Every one of those, I say, do it today, right now.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
Anyway, I'm not trying to press yours too much. I don't understand that one. That one doesn't make as much sense to me. The other ones I really like. The dollar menu one's a little tough for me too. The two food ones, I get where you're going.
Tax incentives are for pushing certain ways of thinking, or not necessarily, certain ways of thinking for either citizens or corporations, right? We want to keep, but like people are talking about how do we counter inflation? How do we counter inflation? This is an obvious way to counter inflation. Yeah, I don't have the basic numbers. There'd be some structuring that would need to be done, but I think generally speaking, every single person in America eats. Every single person is turning to things. I mean, even right now, the president has to figure out how to counter inflation, right? That listen, we can go into it.
But that's where I disagree. I don't think the government should be creating or not creating inflation. I think they keep their costs low and you let capitalism do what capitalism does. If capitalism wasn't having government influence, then I think capitalism would be a more efficient system. The problem is that exact thing, is that when you have a capitalist system that then has the government involved in each little element of how capitalism works, now the government is steering capitalism. But if you let capitalism do its thing, in theory, prices would go down because producers and manufacturers would be able to become more efficient, and they'd say, hey, these people have gotten too expensive. I can serve a better product for cheaper, and I will find the consumers. That's how I think prices should come down. The more government involvement you have, you're steering capitalism, and it can't do its job. And I think that's a big problem we have in America. I genuinely think in America, we've gotten to the point where we're looking for the government to be so involved in fixing the economy that we haven't understood that the government shouldn't be involved in the economy as much as possible. That's the difference between socialism and capitalism. The difference is, one is saying the government is involved in every single component of how the actual system works. They're in control of it. They're in control of the funds and all of that. Capitalism is saying it's a free market. Yes, there will be ups and downs, but the market is an efficient being, and it will find pricing where there's the actual right pricing, as well as it's a driver of innovation, and it's a driver of providing the best services and products possible to the marketplace, because capitalism encourages that. The strong survive and the weak fall out. But the problem is, we're not a capitalist country anymore. Back in the day, and I was thinking about this, back in the day, you compared capitalism being the US and communism being Russia. And we saw how that one ended. The U.S. won. It was a more efficient system. It operated much better. And Russia followed, because you don't ever want to have a communist system. But where we're at today, if you were to look at it, is now we have, comparing a different situation, we have America, which is a capitalist country with large degrees of socialist influence in it, where now it's involved in different parts of the actual economic process because the government has grown. And then you have our adversary, which is China, which is a communist socialist country that has elements of capitalist trickling into it. And I think what we're looking at is a very interesting dynamic where we can no longer say, hey, we're comparing capitalism to communism. What we're actually comparing is a primary and a secondary of those two things. And the problem is that everyone wants the government involved in the economy to fix it, and the government can't fix anything like that. That's not how they operate. They have their list of activities they're supposed to be involved in, and the economy's not one. And when we try to do so many things in this country where the government has to fix this or has to fix that, we're not capitalists anymore. If the government is subsidizing everything they want and then punishing everything they don't want, the government's running the economy. That's not capitalism. Capitalism is where the free market is dictating where the demand is and how to bring the supply. Not where the government's going to encourage demand and supply and pricing and subsidies for people and all of that. I just think that, it's crazy that we've gotten to a point where you can't even say America's truly a capitalist country anymore, because we're capitalism sub-socialism, as opposed to China, which is socialism sub-capitalism. Like, the waters have gotten very muddy on our economy right now. And I think you're going to see a lot of that coming up. I think we're on the verge of it. You can
Guess
mark
what?
my words.
You're right. But the key word in your whole 5-minute rant was in theory. In theory, you're right. Capitalism shouldn't be encouraging things like this. But guess what? Too fucking bad. Guess what? We are in capitalism and socialism having a baby, and we have this whole new thing going on. And you know what? It's too late.
That's
too late.
the problem.
That is the problem. You're right, but it is too late. It is too late.
Americans,
it is too late.
For every American who says it's too late to fix America,
it's not too late to fix America.
Well, no, you don't.
But the capitalism thing, it's
over. No, it's not.
It's
the
over.
only way to fix the country is to bring us back to systems that work. You can't be like, oh, we're a capitalist country, but we're so socialist that we're going to be this forever. Well, then it's doomed. That's when it's too late. But if you switch out of being socialist and you get rid of the socialist programs that are in the country, maybe capitalism can pick things back up again. But if every American's like, it's too late, let's run with this and try to make it work, well, guess what? Then it is too late. But that mindset is what got us here.
It's not. And unfortunately, capitalism is why it's gotten here. Capitalism, which led to cronyism because it wasn't put in check. Now we have this intermittent baby, right? Capitalism has led a multipolarization in America where companies have become almost nearly as powerful as the government systems put into place. And now we're having this, it's not just the government running things. Now we're worried about the corporations running things. And no, I hear you.
But why are the corporations running things? Because they're too big to fail according to the government. If the government didn't back out big corporations every time they failed, that's how capitalism works. That's how, if capitalism is running on its own system and a corporation gets so big and so corrupt that it fails, that corporation goes out of business, and it's painful, and it hurts the economy. But that corporation that we all agreed should fail is not bailed out.
But that's
and then
in
a
theory.
new corporation, yes, but that's the problem. It's in theory.
It's in
because
theory.
the government is involved. It would be in practice if it wasn't.
Or-
if in 2008 they didn't take all the steps they did to bail out the companies, yes, there would be different banks that we're having run the country right now. But one could argue one of the problems we have in the country now is that we have those same banks running the things. One of the problems you can argue is that these big, bloated, inefficient car dealerships were bailed out. I guarantee you that if those things had not been bailed out, new banks and new car companies would have sprouted up. Because this is America, and companies are made by entrepreneurs. So get rid of all the overpaid, overbloated CEOs in this country that are running the country. Get rid of the big corporations that we all know are evil. It's going to suck, but the government's backing the corporations, and the corporations are backing the government, and we're all saying it's too late. You, my friend, have bought into the bait, which is there's no way to change this. So no, in theory is where I live. I live in the theory that you can make things better, and I'm not going to subjugate myself to say that the country is so far gone that we're at the whims of the government fixing the economy, and we're at the whims of the corporations doing what they do. I disagree from the bottom of my bones, and I will die with that opinion.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How many capitalist countries have there been?
Many. But America's the best one.
Tell me some of those.
I mean, you can see it all across history.
Hey, just Google how many capitalist countries have there been. Also, you can't guarantee that that would happen because that's also in theory. That they would spread out more banks and cars. But listen. I hear you. I'm not saying you don't have some like some structure in what you're saying. My thought process is we are where we are. We know that we should be countering inflation. That's what the government Fed system is, right? Helping with figuring out when to lower and raise interest. No matter how you put it, to some degree, we are affecting the economy and doing things to keep the economy running or not running. And the corporations, at some point, were able to influence our government, and that came from a capitalist system. The capitalist system gives these corporations influence. Okay? And that happened because, unfortunately, our capitalist system also has flaws. We've talked about it. Capitalism is not without its flaws, brother. It's not without its flaws. And capitalism lets companies become big. And we just saw in 2008 and in other periods throughout American history where companies, when they got too big, they were too big to fail. So it's not just the government is the reason.
What do you mean they were too big to fail?
Like, they got built out by the government, right?
And how did they get to that point?
Through little regulation.
I think they got to that point because capitalism never held them accountable. You had all these times. If you think 2008 was the first time the government was involved.
No, I just said it wasn't.
But I'm saying 2008 happened because of years and years and years and years of government involvement in private corporations, giving them the subsidies they had, allowing them to grow beyond normal sizes. Yes, it's there, and I agree. The one thing I think government has an involvement in the economy is to prevent monopolies. I agree with that because that is a natural outcome of capitalism. I understand that is a component flaw of capitalism, but I think there's a way to do that without having them involved right now, because that is not all they're doing right now. They're way beyond just saying, hey, we're here to prevent monopolies. They're out here telling what's good and what's bad and what these companies will bail out and these we won't. And then when you get to a 2008, after years and years and years of them having a government-involved system, and then they're like, oh, shit, this company's actually bad, and we've been kind of incentivizing them with all these crazy components, then they bailed them out, yes. But they should have never gotten to that point, and I don't think that those corporations came back and became efficient actors in the marketplace. I think a lot of those corporations got bailed out and they continued business as usual. Maybe they had a little fine and it was a write-off on their books. They said, an unexpected expense, keep on going. They didn't about face. Yeah, there was a little more regulation involved and a little more brought in, but they're still just as big. They're just as much too big to fail. And the next time we have an oh shit moment when they've done it again, history has indicated that we're just going to bail them out again. So we haven't solved anything. It's just like everything else, like we talk about in the healthcare industry. We don't cure diseases, we treat them. We don't address bad corporations, we treat them and we bail them out. We keep them going. We keep them alive. Zombie companies or bloated companies or inefficient companies or corrupt companies. I think capitalism would have weeded them out long ago had it not been for government involvement.
What was the answer to that?
Well, I didn't get any clear answers, but what I did find is that it says, in theory, capitalism is only absolute, but no country's ever achieved 100% capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that is true, but we are trending in the direction of less and less and less capitalism, and it's worse and worse and worse for the economy.
So we're trending towards how countries normally operate. We are recognizing that although capitalism in theory would be good for the country, right? In theory, all these great things, but ultimately all countries will do things to regulate their economy. All countries, like America at no point didn't not do anything towards its economy.
Absolutely. But what I'm saying is we were far more capitalistic before and we're far less now, and it's worse. There was a period of time where the capitalism was more freely running, and these are the things we're referencing. We're saying, oh, why was development so good, and why was the country growing so fast, and why was the economy so good? It's because we were more capitalist. And now, when we add things like you said, with the Federal Reserve and the government influences and the government subsidies and the government bailouts, we are more socialist. And I would argue the economy is not operating as well. Everything costs more to do, it's slower to get it done, and it doesn't work as well. It is literally failing in front of our eyes in direct correlation with the more the government's getting involved. It's the same thing we said about the food, how it's crazy how the food is getting worse for us the more the government's involved. It's crazy how the economy is working worse the more they're involved. And for us to say, let's get them more involved because we are where we are, that doesn't make sense to me. Peel them back. Regulation. Okay. Last thing. Regulation, and I've heard this, so I'm not taking credit for this idea, but it's so true. When you add a regulation, that regulation stays, and you add more and more and more, and you can regulate a country to death. You can also government involve a country to death with the economy. The more regulations you add, the more restrictions you're putting on the economy. And we are regulated to death as opposed to a free operating society and country where we both had free citizens as well as a free market. And things would work better that way. So I just, again, refute that it's because we are where we are, so now let's start working it. Peel back regulation, peel back government involvement in the economy, and I think you'd see things get better. It's not a too late, just make it worse.
Okay, first of all, this isn't regulation. It's a tax incentive. We're not stopping anybody from going, in theory, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about theories. In theory, this wouldn't stop anybody from charging anything that they want. All it would do is incentivize companies that sell food to sell things under a certain price. It's a tax incentive. It's a tax break. It's not regulation, and it's not direct money that's being taken out of the government to pay for anything specifically. And that is what I'm saying. Say what you want about capitalism. You want to pull back regulation, that's fine. That still doesn't affect what I am talking about. Adding regulation or deregulating wouldn't affect anything that I'm saying in this bill. It would do nothing.
Disagree.
So, okay. Well, we can agree to disagree.
We'll agree to disagree.
Are you, do you have any more economy talk?
I have plenty more economy talk, but we're already an hour and 15 in. I think we're good.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Well,
we'll have to do an economy part 2 because I did a capitalism rant, and I think it's very different than the economy we could talk about right now. A lot going on. We'll save that for, though it is kind of relevant. I feel like I'm about to go on this trip, and by the time I'm back, I'm calling it now. I think the economy is going to have had some shakes in it and some shocks in it that we're all going to be thinking about the economy a lot more in the coming weeks.
Yeah. No, seriously. Well, listen, this has been a good conversation, very lively here at the end. But yeah, we'll be back soon, and we good with everything?
Yeah.
All right. Shout out to Pope.
Shout out to Pope.